The progressive development of man is vitally dependent on invention. It is the most important product of his creative brain. When we look across the vast, sweeping history of our species, we do not see a story of mere survival. We see a chronicle of the mind's victory over the limitations of the flesh and the seemingly insurmountable barriers of the physical world. In the primordial darkness, man was a victim of the elements, a creature of whim and weather, scattered across a hostile landscape like dust in the wind. But the first spark struck from flint was not merely a tool for warmth, it was the first broadcast of human intent into a silent universe. It was the moment man stopped asking the earth for permission and began to dictate the terms of his existence, signaling that the soul had finally found a way to manifest its internal fire in the external world. Its ultimate purpose is the complete mastery of mind over the material world, the harnessing of human nature to human needs. We are not here to be subjects of the earth. We are here to be its architects, its engineers, and its stewards. I speak to you today not merely as a man of science who has spent his hours measuring the invisible oscillations of the ether and the rhythmic pulse of the planet, but as a man who has stood in the eye of the storm. I have seen my life's work, mountains of blueprints, years of delicate calculations, and the very physical manifestations of my soul reduced to grey ashes in a single night of fire. I have heard my name whispered in the halls of skeptics, spoken with the pity reserved for the mad or the derided. I have known the cold sting of betrayal from those who promised cooperation but sought only to chain the lightning for their own narrow ends, and I have felt the weight of poverty when the world was not yet ready for the light I offered. Yet I stand before you. Why? Because I possess the iron will. The iron will is that singular, unyielding frequency of the human soul that allows a man to transcend the limitations of his era and the poverty of his circumstances. Most men are like weather vanes, turning with the breeze of public opinion or the chilling winds of misfortune, losing their direction the moment the sky grows dark. But the man of iron is the wind itself. To succeed in the business of life and to achieve those goals which the world deems impossible, one must understand that the human mind is a receiver and the universe is the transmitter. There is a core of knowledge, a central source of energy in the universe from which we all draw, a great reservoir of truth, but the receiver must be tuned with an iron hand. If the dial is loose, if the components are dusty with sloth, or if the internal wiring is frayed by doubt, you will receive nothing but the static of the mundane and the noise of the masses. In my youth, I discovered that I possessed a peculiar faculty, a gift that was at once a blessing and a torment. I could see my inventions with such clarity that I did not need to draw a single line upon a page or construct a crude model for testing. While other students struggled with compass and protractor, scratching out endless revisions on paper that would inevitably tear under the weight of their frustration, I was building empires in the air. I could run a motor in my mind, let it operate for weeks, and then examine it for signs of wear. I could see the commutator sparking. I could hear the hum of the alternating current as it surged through the coils. I could feel the heat radiating from the iron core. By the time I moved to the physical workbench, the invention was already a veteran of my mental wars. I had already corrected the friction, smoothed the bearings, and optimized the torque before a single screw was turned in the physical world. This is the first lesson of the iron wisdom. Before you can build a kingdom in the physical world, you must build it with absolute precision in the mental laboratory. The modern businessman is too often a man of frantic, headless action, mistaking movement for progress. He rushes to the market with half-formed ideas, with sparks that have no fuel, hoping that the world will provide the substance his vision lacks. He seeks the first mover advantage without considering if he has a destination or a map. They encounter the first resistance, the first friction of reality, and their fire is extinguished. They are surprised when the world says no, when the bank denies the loan, or when the prototype fails under the weight of gravity. They lack the mental fortitude to sustain the image of their success against the darkness of temporary failure, and so they perish in the shadows of their own impatience. You must insulate your vision. Think of your idea as a high-voltage current of immense potential. If it is not insulated by deep thought, rigorous mental testing, and the thick glass of conviction, the energy will leak into the ground long before it reaches the bulb. You must cultivate it in the silence of your own soul until it is so vivid, so real, and so tangible that the physical manifestation is merely a formality, a secondary shadow cast by the brilliant light of your internal certainty. In business, this is the blueprint of the soul. Do not seek investors for a ghost. Do not ask men to believe in a vapor that vanishes at the first touch of a breeze. Seek partners for a machine that is already running in the high voltage chambers of your mind. When you speak from a place of such internal certainty, your voice carries the frequency of truth, a resonance that shakes the foundations of doubt in others. People do not invest in products. They invest in the inevitability of a man's vision. Vision alone, however, is a static charge. It is a potential, a great lake held behind a dam, beautiful to behold, but useless until it is put into motion. To create a current, there must be a difference in potential. There must be struggle. There must be a low for the high to flow toward. I have often been asked how I endured the betrayals, the theft of my ideas by men of smaller minds, the loss of the patents for the polyphase system which should have been my crown, and the literal burning of my laboratory in 1895. On that day, 40 years of work, of records, and of irreplaceable prototypes vanished in a pillar of smoke. A lesser man would have laid down in the debris and let the silence take him. The answer to my survival lies in the conservation of energy. The average man dissipates his energy in 1,000 directions, like a spray of water hitting a stone. He is a leaky vessel, losing power through every crack in his character. He spends his morning worrying about social trivialities, his afternoon in the pursuit of immediate comforts, and his evening paralyzed by the fear of what his neighbors think of him. He is obsessed with the now, the easy, and the pleasant, which are the enemies of the great and the eternal. I, however, directed every ounce of my biological and mental force toward a single point, like sunlight through a magnifying glass. This is what the modern world calls productivity, but I call it resonance. Resonance occurs when the timing of your efforts matches the natural frequency of your goal. When you align your daily actions, the way you eat, the way you speak, the way you think, and even the way you breathe, with your ultimate purpose, you create a feedback loop that grows in power with every passing hour. Perseverance is not the act of hitting a wall repeatedly with your head. That is merely a waste of bone and brain matter, a display of stubbornness without intelligence. Perseverance is the act of becoming a force so concentrated, so dense, and so unwavering that the wall must eventually shatter to make way for your passage. If you wish to achieve financial independence, you must stop leaking energy. Consider your expenditures, both financial and emotional. Every dollar spent on vanity, on a finer coat than you need, or a carriage that serves only to impress the unimpressible, is a watt of power lost to the void. Every hour spent in idle talk is a drop in the voltage of your ambition. You must become a closed circuit, a system that feeds upon its own momentum and refuses to be drained by the trivialities of the crowd. Consider the resistance of the world. In the study of electricity, we know that every medium has impedance. Even the finest copper wire, refined to the highest degree, offers some resistance to the flow of the current, turning potential energy into heat. The world is a medium of high impedance. It does not want to change. It prefers the inertia of the known. It is comfortable in its darkness because the darkness hides the flaws of the inefficient and the crimes of the mediocre. When I proposed the alternating current, I was not met with curiosity or scientific inquiry. I was met with a campaign of terror fueled by the greed of those who owned the status quo. My opponents went to ghoulish lengths, electrocuting innocent animals in public squares to prove my system was dangerous, preying on the fears of the uneducated. They used the press to label me a madman, a wizard of dark and dangerous arts who sought to bring death into the home. In your journey toward your goals, you will face the Edisons of your time. These are the men and women who are heavily invested in the old ways, the direct current of the status quo, and they will fight to the death to protect their dying monopolies. They fear the light you are trying to bring because light reveals the obsolescence of their warehouses and the fragility of their authority. You must understand that their resistance is not a personal insult, it is a natural law of physics. It is the friction that tests the durability of your resolve and the strength of your character. Do not argue with them. An electron does not argue with the resistor. It simply works its way through, converting the resistance into the very heat that can eventually melt the barrier. Do not waste your breath defending your character to those who are paid to misunderstand you. Let your results be the lightning that illuminates the sky, making their whispers irrelevant in the roar of your success. If I had spent my time answering every critic, the world would still be lit by gas lamps and the hum of the AC motor would be a silent dream in the mind of a dead man. In business, your greatest defense is your excellence. Your greatest revenge is your success. Build your tower. Even if the world mocks the foundation and calls you a dreamer, the higher the tower, the further the signal will reach. If your foundation is deep in the bedrock of truth, the height of your ambition will eventually command the horizon, and those who mocked you will find themselves using the very tools you created. There is a profound relationship between the mind and the body that the modern seeker often ignores in his haste. They treat their bodies as a mere luggage rack for their heads, filling them with the fuel of laziness and expecting the output of a titan. But to maintain the iron will, one must treat the body as a sacred instrument, a finely tuned dynamo that must be kept in perfect balance. I have always been a man of strict habits, often appearing eccentric to the casual observer who sees the routine but not the reason. I measured the volume of my food with mathematical precision. I walked 10 miles every day, regardless of the weather, to keep the blood flowing and the thoughts moving, and I viewed sleep as a necessary but brief interruption to the real work of living. While I do not suggest every man follow my exact regimen, I do insist that you cannot have a high-performance output with a low-quality input. If you wish to persevere through the long nights of a startup or the decades required to build a fortune that can change the world, you must cultivate a physical resilience. The mind cannot soar if the body is a lead weight dragging it back to the earth. Discipline is the insulation that prevents the short-circuiting of your potential. When you feel the urge to quit, when the exhaustion of the struggle weighs upon you like a physical burden, remember that the most powerful currents are those that flow through the most refined conductors. A dirty wire generates heat and melts under pressure. A pure wire carries the power to light a city without breaking. Keep your wires clean. Abstain from the stimulants that offer a false peak followed by a valley of despair. Seek the clarity of the mountain air and the strength of a disciplined frame. Your ambition is the current. Your body is the motor. Do not let the motor seize for want of maintenance or the accumulation of the rust of indulgence. Let us speak of the fire, that burning desire for independence. In the modern tongue, they speak of financial independence, retire early, as if the goal of life were to sit in idle silence. To me, independence was never about the accumulation of gold for gold's sake. Gold is a heavy metal. It is a sluggish conductor of the soul's intent and often serves as a shackle rather than a key. I have had millions in my hands, enough to buy the finest palaces and live in luxury for 1,000 lifetimes. I have held the contracts that would have made me the wealthiest man on the planet, and I have torn them up. Why? To fund the next great leap for humanity. True independence is the freedom to work on what the soul dictates, without the interference of those who cannot see beyond the next fiscal year. It is the ability to say no to the financier who wishes to chain your genius to a quarterly profit. To achieve this, you must be prepared to endure periods of extreme deprivation, where the only thing that sustains you is the beauty of the idea you carry. I have lived on milk and bread in a New York boarding house, my coat threadbare and my shoes worn thin, while my mind was traversing the galaxies and unlocking the secrets of the rotating magnetic field. This is the iron price of freedom. If you are afraid of poverty, you are a slave to the current system and will always be manageable by those who hold the purse strings. The system uses your fear of a cold room and an empty stomach to keep you turning the wheel of their choosing. But if you can look at a crust of bread and see it as the fuel for your next great invention, then you are truly free. Perseverance is the ability to maintain your dignity and your drive when the bank account is empty and the world has turned its back. It is the knowledge that your value is not determined by the market, but by the magnitude of the problem you are solving and the elegance of your solution. If you solve a problem for a man, he pays you in coin. If you solve a problem for the world, the universe pays you in immortality. Do not be discouraged by the slow accumulation of wealth. Focus instead on the accumulation of capability and the refinement of your will. The currency of the future is not paper, it is the power of the focused mind. The mastery of the material world is not a feat of brute strength, but a feat of synchronization. Most men view the world as a collection of solid objects, of unyielding walls and heavy weights. They see a mountain and think of the shovel. They see a sea and think of the oar. But the man of iron wisdom sees the mountain as a collection of vibrations and the sea as a medium of fluid energy. To increase the power of your life's work, you must stop fighting the material and start commanding the frequency. This requires an expansion of the self that most are too timid to attempt. They prefer the safety of their smallness, the comfort of their limitations, because to expand is to increase the surface area that the world can strike. But to the dynamo, every strike is merely more energy to be absorbed and converted. Consider the nature of the receiver in more granular detail. If the human mind is a receiver, we must ask, what is the nature of the signal? The universe is not a chaotic void. It is a symphony of mathematical precision. Every thought you have is a vibration that goes out into the ether. If your thoughts are fragmented, if you spend your morning in anger, your afternoon in lust, and your evening in regret, you are broadcasting a discordant signal. You are creating noise in the very medium you are trying to use for your advancement. The iron will demands a purity of broadcast. You must become so single-minded that your entire being vibrates at the frequency of your goal. This is why I have often spent days in solitude, refusing the company of even my closest associates. Solitude is the laboratory of the soul. In the silence, the noise of the world's broadcast fades, and the clear, high-pitched signal of universal truth becomes audible. In business, this translates to the deep work. If you are constantly interrupted by the trivial pings of modern correspondence or the social obligations of the market, you will never reach the resonance required for true invention. But how does one sustain this when the world is actively trying to ground your circuit? We must look at the concept of mental induction. In the same way that a current in one coil can induce a current in another without physical contact, your will can induce action in the world around you. This is the secret of true leadership and the foundation of any great enterprise. You do not lead by command, you lead by the intensity of your own resonance. If your vision is strong enough, it creates a field, a Tesla field of ambition that draws people, capital, and circumstances toward you. They find themselves wanting to be near you, not because they understand your blueprints, but because they feel the pull of the current. However, you must be careful. If your field is not stable, you will attract parasitic oscillations, individuals who wish to feed off your energy without contributing to the circuit. You must learn to be an insulator as much as a conductor. You must know who to let into your laboratory and who to keep at the gate. In my dealings with the financiers of the Gilded Age, I saw that they were motivated by a singular, crude vibration, the accumulation of control. They did not care for the beauty of the rotating magnetic field. They cared only for the size of the fence they could build around it. To deal with such men, you must use the iron will to become an opaque conductor. You must show them enough light to dazzle them, but you must keep the source of that light hidden within the lead-lined chambers of your own resolve. Never reveal the full magnitude of your vision to a man who only thinks in terms of fences. If you tell a man who sells wood that you have invented a way to create heat from the air, he will not celebrate your genius. He will try to burn your blueprints to save his lumberyard. This leads us to the tactics of the lightning rod. In any great venture, you will become a target for the static discharge of the envious and the stagnant. They will throw bolts of criticism, litigation, and character assassination at you. The average man tries to catch these bolts with his bare hands. He tries to argue, to litigate, and to defend. This is a fatal leakage of energy. Instead, you must be the rod. Let the strike hit you, but have your grounding so well established through the excellence of your work and the purity of your habits that the energy of their attack passes through you and into the earth without heating your internal wires. Use the heat of their hatred to temper your own steel. I have found that the more they attacked the alternating current, the more the public became curious about it. Their campaign of terror became my most effective advertisement. In business, if you have no enemies, you have no current. A current only flows where there is a difference in potential. Consider the geometry of the crowd. The masses are like iron filings on a sheet of glass. Alone, they are scattered and directionless, but place a powerful magnet beneath the glass, and they instantly align in beautiful, symmetric curves. Your iron will is that magnet. You do not need to speak to every individual filing. You only need to increase the strength of your own field. This is the secret of the unseen marketing. When you create something that is truly in harmony with the laws of the universe, something that solves a fundamental human need with elegance, the filings of the market will align themselves toward you by natural law. You will not need to beg for customers. They will be drawn to the magnetism of your excellence. To understand the deeper layers of this iron will, one must examine the architecture of the etheric mind. Every morning, upon the first return of consciousness from the ether of sleep, the mind is at its most receptive. Most men immediately flood this delicate receiver with the noise of the world. To do this is to short-circuit your potential before the day has even begun. You must guard the first hour of your day with an iron hand. In this hour, you are not a businessman or a citizen. You are a creator. You must hold the image of your ultimate goal with such intensity that it burns away the fog of the mundane. If you can see your victory in the first light of dawn, the shadows of the afternoon will have no power over you. The world is slow. The ether is instantaneous, but the material world is heavy and filled with sludge. I have often been decades ahead of my time. I saw the world system of wireless energy in the late 19th century, yet the world is still struggling with wires and poles in the 20th. This discrepancy can lead to the greatest despair a man can know, the despair of being a giant in a world of children. To survive this, you must develop a different relationship with time. You must realize that if you have built it perfectly in your mind, it already exists in the most important sense. The physical world is just a slow developing photograph. Perseverance is the patience to wait for the chemicals of reality to reveal the image you have already captured. You have the machines of gods, but you still possess the wills of children. You seek hacks and shortcuts for greatness, forgetting that the only way to generate true power is through the steady, relentless rotation of the soul around a central axis of purpose. You are afraid of the dark, yet you refuse to become the light. The fire you seek is a small and hollow goal if it is not accompanied by the expansion of the mind. To retire from work is to retire from life. The universe never retires. The stars never stop burning. The atoms never stop spinning. Your goal should not be to stop, but to accelerate until you are in perfect harmony with the cosmic motion. The biochemical laboratory of the self. The human body is often mistaken for a vessel of flesh and bone, but to the man of iron will, it is a complex electrochemical battery. Most individuals allow their internal chemistry to become a stagnant pool of low-quality additives, wondering why their mental engine knocks and sputters when they attempt to climb the steep grades of ambition. You must realize that every morsel of food, every drop of water, and every breath of air is a chemical input that either increases or decreases the conductivity of your soul. I have long advocated for a life of extreme dietary precision. To the uninitiated, my refusal of certain meats and stimulants appeared as eccentricity, but it was in fact a matter of ohmic resistance. A body bogged down by the heavy, complex proteins of the slaughterhouse is a body that spends its energy on the crude labor of digestion rather than the refined work of thought. If you wish to perceive the invisible oscillations of the universe, your blood must be light and your nerves must be clear. I have found that a diet centered on the simplest elements, milk, honey, and the products of the field, allows the brain to operate at a higher frequency. You are not eating for pleasure, you are fueling a dynamo. Furthermore, we must address the rhythm of the machine. The modern world is obsessed with grinding and hustling, terms that imply a violent, abrasive movement that eventually destroys the bearings of the mind. I do not suggest endless labor, but rather harmonic labor. The walk is as important as the workbench. When I walked the streets of New York or the parks of Budapest, I was not merely moving my legs, I was circulating the magnetic field of my thoughts. Physical movement is the cooling system for the mental laboratory. It prevents the local overheating of a single idea and allows the broader signal of the universe to enter the mind. The mathematics of the etheric marketplace. Beyond the biological, we must master the geometry of value. The marketplace is not a collection of buildings or a tally of ledgers. It is a field of probability waves. Every invention, every business plan, and every brand is a waveform searching for a resonant peak in the public consciousness. Most businessmen approach the market with a brute force philosophy. They believe that if they spend enough money on advertising or shout loudly enough in the press, they can force their product into the hands of the consumer. This is the direct current approach, inefficient and prone to massive loss over distance. The man of iron will uses the alternating current of influence. He identifies the natural harmonic frequencies of human desire and tunes his product to match them. When you find the frequency of a society's need, you do not need to sell, you merely need to connect. The energy of the market will then flow through your system by its own momentum. Consider the law of the inverse square in social influence. The power of your message decreases as the square of the distance from the source of your integrity. If you are not a man of iron at your core, your influence will dissipate long before it reaches the edges of the world. But if your internal voltage is high enough, your signal will penetrate even the most shielded hearts. This is why I have never cared for the marketing of my name. I cared only for the purity of my broadcast. If the light is bright enough, the world will find its way to the lighthouse. The 0 point of financial failure. We must now confront the most terrifying aspect of the journey toward independence, the 0 point. This is the moment when the bank account is dry, the creditors are at the door, and the world is laughing at your folly. Most men collapse at the 0 point. They assume that because the visible energy, money, is gone, the potential energy, the idea, is also dead. This is a fundamental error in physics. In the laboratory, the moment of zero current is often the moment just before the polarity reverses and the power surges back with even greater force. The 0 point is not an end. It is a phase shift. It is the universe testing whether your will is truly made of iron or merely tin. If you can stand in the wreckage of your laboratory, as I did in 1895, and feel the current of purpose still flowing through your veins, then you are invincible. Perseverance at the 0 point requires a form of spiritual superconductivity. You must strip away all resistance, your pride, your fear, your attachment to comfort, until there is nothing left but the vision. When you reach this state, the universe can no longer ignore you. It must provide the means for your manifestation, for you have become a fundamental law of nature. In closing, I tell you this. Do not be afraid of the dark, for the dark is not an entity. It is simply the absence of light that you have not yet created. The path to success is paved with the bones of those who gave up when the finish line was just beyond the horizon, hidden by a thin veil of doubt. Be the man of iron. Be the conductor of the divine spark. Let your life be a testament to the power of a single mind, focused with laser precision, refusing to be dimmed by the shadows of doubt or the whispers of the small-minded. The world does not need more followers. It needs more dynamos. It needs men and women who will stand in the face of the storm and say, I am the lightning. Carry this wisdom into your ventures, into your homes, and into the very core of your being. The future is not something you wait for like a passenger at a station. It is something you build, one vibration, one thought, and one unyielding act of perseverance at a time. May your current be strong, your insulation hold, and your light be eternal.